welcome to Commander's Comment. We're finishing up with Commander Paul Gremlin, the Commander-in-Chief of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, on our diversity comments this month. This is the month of February, and of course the Sons of Confederate Veterans, we celebrate February as our Confederate Diversity Month. We've already gone through 2 segments of this issue, and we're working on the religious diversity within the Confederacy now. You know, Commander, the South being predominantly a Protestant part of the nation, the United States, most people think of us mostly as Baptists and Methodists and that sort of thing. But actually there were many Roman Catholics and even Jews and Jewish temples in the South, as well as Jewish, if I remember correctly, Jewish members in the government.
You bring up the Jewish faith. Judah P. Benjamin. He was the first man of the Jewish faith to serve in any cabinet in America, but he served in Jefferson Davis's cabinet in the Confederate States, and he was the Jewish religion, and he was, like I said, the first one in any cabinet position in America to serve in a cabinet position and being a Jew. Also, you've got, I know in Shreveport, there's Colonel Leon Marks, who was Jewish faith, and he's buried there in Shreveport. But he was very active in the Confederate Army as well.
And you did say he was a colonel.
And he was a colonel,
so
correct.
He led Christian men.
Yes.
That wasn't a whole battalion of just Jewish young men.
Right, yeah. He led men of all faiths as well. So
speaks well for diversity, doesn't it?
It does. It does for a fact.
Well, it's absolutely marvelous. Well, and other than that Jewish element, you know, like as I said, the South is noted to be primarily Protestant, but yet when you look at the heroes of the Confederacy, the first 2 heroes of the Confederacy was, of course, Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard, a Roman Catholic, and Admiral Raphael Semmes of the Confederate States Navy. So these were the first 2 heroes of the South, and they were Roman Catholic. So we have a Protestant, essentially a Protestant nation. The Confederacy was basically a Protestant nation, but their first 2 great heroes were Roman Catholic.
Well, and General Robert Lee recognized all the different faiths as well throughout the camp. So you had your Jewish services, you had your Catholic Mass, you had your Protestant services. So it was recognized throughout the Confederate Army of the different religious faiths, and they were able to accommodate that as well.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken here, there were Protestant chaplains of all Protestant faith, there were Roman Catholic chaplains, and there were rabbis who were also chaplains that served the soldiers and their communions and their faiths throughout the war. So that's marvelous.
Well, there's a well-known Catholic priest, Father Abram J. Ryan. He was a poet, a priest, and also, of course, a defender of the South. He's probably best known for after Tennessee, in Tennessee Rectory, after the South had surrendered. He wrote The Conquered Banner, which he is well known for, and I'd like to read that because of what it says, and given the time that he wrote it, it was all on everyone's mind. It's in part, it says, "Furl that banner, for 'tis weary, round its staff 'tis drooping dreary. Furl it, fold it, it is best, for there's not a man to wave it, and there's not a sword to save it, and there's not one left lave it. In the blood which heroes gave it, and its foes now scorn and brave it. Furl it, hide it, let it rest." He was well known for that, and it touched so many people, and this was after, like I said, after the South had surrendered.
That's amazing. Now, what year do you think that was about?
It was after the war. Right after the war, I would think 1865, maybe.
65, 66. That's interesting because a few years later, Stephen D. Lee in New Orleans, Louisiana, gave us our famous charge, the charge for the Confederate Sons of Confederate Veterans. And one of the things he told us to do was to vindicate the cause of the South. So these men, whether it's General Lee or Father Abram Ryan, they all understood what was at stake here.
And General Lee also charged us to emulate the virtues of the Confederate veteran as well.
That's great. And one of the things that I was really surprised at when I was doing research early on in the religious diversity was how many different chaplains of different faiths, not even just in the Protestant, because you had Baptists, Methodists, and Presbyterians all working together as a unit for the care of the soldiers. But also, I read in a journal of and I forget his name, he was, I believe, a priest, a Roman Catholic priest from New Orleans, who was ministering to his communion there in the Army of Northern Virginia. And he noted in his letter to some of his parishioners back in New Orleans, he said it was strange in one sense but not in another that a Catholic priest is performing services in a Methodist church where the Baptist women and the Presbyterian women are all providing the services to see that the Mass is presented in its proper format. He said it really shows how much these people are pulling together.
When you talk about pulling together, my chaplain in chief, Reverend Dr. Herman White from North Carolina, he talks a lot about the Southern, revival that spread throughout the Confederacy.
Oh yes, I think it's known as the Great Revival
That's it.
that
Yes.
broke out.
Yes.
And this is the second Great Revival that
Right.
broke out during the war. It's interesting you mentioned that. There were two books that I have that I've read. It does a wonderful job of describing that revival. One of them was written by William J. Jones. He wrote Christ in the Camp. Now, he was a Baptist minister, but there's another book, The Great Revival in the Southern Armies by W.W. Bennett, who was a Methodist minister. And of course, those of us who are Presbyterian, we all recognize the name of Robert Louis Dabney, who was a prolific writer and defender of the South, and he served as General Stonewall Jackson's chief of staff during the Valley Campaign, and he also served as a chaplain to the Army. So there's a lot of diversity in the Confederate chaplains, and a lot of diversity in the religious opinions, but they were unity. And this is where we as Christians need to understand there were unity because they worshiped the same God, the same Christ, the same biblical worldview was held. The Jewish faith could work with that group because it was based upon Old Testament biblical theology.
And that's one of the main things that we're trying to point out, especially this month, but it always is that the Confederate Army was made up of all these different creeds, colors, race, religions, nationalities, ethnicities. It was made up of all these.
Correct.
And it was the first army to do so.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of times people get caught up in what they're hearing modern day, reasons and excuses, and they forget just exactly what we're made up of.
Well, what we call the neo-Marxist element, those liberals, progressive, they use hatred and bigotry as a tool to gin up support for their cause.
And cause division.
It caused division. We in the Sons of Confederate Veterans, we're preaching unity and diversity.
Exactly.
A unity of diverse people because we had a common cause, a common Southland and a common homeland.
That's right.
Commander Gremlin, this ends our third segment of this diversity for the month of February here. Thank you. And we will be coming back next month in March, and we'll be seeing y'all again at that point in time. And we really enjoyed this three-part series on diversity in the Confederacy.
And what we've been saying about diversity, we don't want to be the only ones saying this. We're putting this out there so everyone, they can do their own research.
Absolutely.
All this information is easy to find. It's right there. So and I always heard, once you learn something, then you're responsible for telling someone else.
Absolutely.
And that's what we need our viewers to do, is to tell someone else.
Good. Thank you a lot, Commander Gremlin, and we look forward to seeing you and all our viewers again next month for the March issue of Commander's Comment. Thank you a lot.
Friends, in part one of this three-part series on Confederate and Old South diversity, you heard Commander Grambling proclaim a national rally at Stone Mountain Park near Atlanta, Georgia, to be held on April the 6th, 2019, beginning at noontime. Please make plans to attend now. Again, I remind you that the left is constantly working to destroy the Confederate monument at the park. A huge rally would send a message to all of America that the monument should be preserved, respected, and supported. On the other hand, a poorly attended rally would send the opposite message. In the January 14, 2019 edition of the Clarion Ledger in Jackson, Mississippi, we find this headline on the front page: "Groups using Super Bowl to push against Confederate statues." Various left-wing groups are coming together to kick off a renewed war on the Confederacy and to promote a broad neo-Marxist agenda that includes the removal of Confederate monuments in America. Specifically, the monument at Stone Mountain is a target. Note that the leftists are declaring war. Folks, if good people of the South fail to defend themselves from evil when it threatens, we'll lose everything. Our monuments, our heritage, our freedom, and even our lives. Because the left won't stop until we stop them. Put the April 6th rally on your calendar. Download the promotional flyer at MakeDixieGreatAgain.org and post it on your website and through social media, email it far and wide, and make printed copies to pass out to everyone you can. Now, for my second point, regardless of your faith, if you have ancestors who served in the Confederate military, and it is estimated today that there are 75 million people with Confederate ancestry, we invite you to join with us in the SCV and in the Southern Victory Campaign to make Dixie great again. The SCV has genealogists who can help you find your ancestors so you can join the SCV. But remember that you do not have to be a member of the Sons to join the campaign to make Dixie great again. In closing, I remind you that this is part 3 of a 3-part series on diversity in Dixie and the Confederacy. If you've not seen parts 1 or 2, go to MakeDixieGreatAgain.org to find the links. You'll enjoy those videos also. I'm S. Ross Aldridge. Thanks for watching the February 2019 edition of Commander's Comments. Until next time, Dio Vindice.